before we formally start, I'm just going to turn you over to Ashlyn. Ashlyn's just going to do a check-in for the Battersea Museum material. Ashlyn?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Pam. So I just wanted to just kind of like circle in and let folks know that at the moment, which is fantastic, we have all the student documents, so agreements, health and safety, all that's been kind of everyone's chalked up and has all those. So that's great. Thank you all for being so um, good about getting those in. So now we can kind of start to look at the Excel spreadsheet, which I've shared in a few different places on Canvas. You can find it on the discussions page as well. I sent out an announcement, pretty sure, a couple announcements. And so folks can go into that Excel document. I think most people have, to be honest. There might be a few people still outstanding, but go in there, put your name and preferred top 3 dates. And Sean, who you met at the orientation at Battersea Museum, and I are gonna kind of like look at the dates and see what's working for people and really make this work for you. So we're gonna be working on that, but we need your input so we can give you the output. So yeah, we'll be doing that. And that's kind of like next steps because you'll be doing your two shifts. They're both going to be 3 hours. Um, and of course, there's the one day that the shoe museum's like not open at all. So obviously, don't put that day. I think it's Tuesdays. Um, there's one day of the week that like I put on the spreadsheet like shoe museum's not open, so don't put that. Please don't do that. Just read the document. It's pretty self-sufficient. Someone's hands up. I don't know if the question's for me or Pam or
It's for you.
somebody. It's for you.
The Excel sheet isn't being shared. It's saying that I have to request access. And I did request access a few days ago, but I just wanted to check in if everyone else is having that problem or if it's just me.
Thanks for voicing that. Yeah, it's frustrating because you know what? I share it with like everybody, and then it's like, oh, it's gonna expire in like a couple days. And I'm like, can we just leave it open so people can do what they gotta do? So let me check. I
Thank
didn't
you.
receive a request. Yeah, no worries. Yeah, so Tuesdays is the day that it's a no-go. And that would be Monday to Saturday, 10 to 5. And then Sundays, 12 to 5. If you're like wondering, I see people bouncing around in it right now, which I guess is a good sign that other people have access to it. Alexandra, to answer your question, but I will update the access. So it's like,
Yeah, it says that I'm still waiting for approval, but
okay,
let me know if I can just talk to you after if it's still a problem.
I'm just gonna, because you're the only one right now voicing the concern, and like I do see other people on the document, and like 20, there's like 29 names. So I have a feeling it might, not to single you out in any way, shape, or form, but it might just be you. So I'm gonna just share it with you. Let me know when you get that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all from me. Unless you had anyone else has any questions, concerns. I know there's a presentation waiting and a lovely guest, so I don't want to keep anybody. But yeah, I was just popping in.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashlyn.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to play some of this, and I think I still will, if that's okay with you, Nancy. Um, Unfortunately, as I said, my computer's giving me some challenges here. Let me just make sure it's set up properly. Okay. Yeah, the joys of having no computer that's working. This is actually an interview with Senator, if it works, with Senator Murray Sinclair. Maybe it's not going to work, and then it's all going to be a joke. So hold on. This is obviously going to be my technically challenging day. Because there's another video I want to show as well. When in doubt, so, oh, wait a minute, it's doing something. Oh my God. I hope yours works okay, Nancy. I think this is it. It's just taking its sweet time. This is a 14-year-old computer. Okay, come on. I'm not going to start redoing this, restart my device.
It's been just over 2 years since the truth.
Okay, it seems to be working. So this is actually Murray Sinclair, as I mentioned, and I should just give a bit of a content warning on this as well, because he is talking about cultural genocide and the situation around residential schools as well. And he's being interviewed as well by a young Indigenous journalist. Sorry, I'm having one of those mornings. And unfortunately, I can't, my computer's not allowing me to blow this up to full screen. So hopefully this will work. If it will continue to play. You just gotta laugh, right? Come on, sweetie. Because my other computer's not working on this.
Reconciliation Commission released its final report and put forward 94 calls to action. CBC has taken a hard look at how far we've come and how far we have left to go on the road to reconciliation. Senator Murray Sinclair was the Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner and wrote the 94 calls to action. I sat down with him and asked him if Canadians today were better informed about residential schools.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question of that. I think the question, though, is whether they're more motivated than they were on the day the report was released. And because over time, the energy from events like that tends to wane and drop off. So I think among the public, the public still largely struggles with the question of what can we do about it.
I guess for people that maybe don't know anything about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, how would you explain it to them?
So Truth and Reconciliation Commission was about giving a forum to the survivors and also to those who had worked in the schools to be able to come together in a process to address what had happened in the schools, but also what had happened in this country.
When you were writing the calls to action, who did you have in mind?
You, young Indigenous people, because I always said at that time in 2015, we were faced with a federal government that had already indicated that through their own actions, so much through words, but through their actions, that they were unlikely to pick up the calls to action and do anything with them. And in the event that they continued in power, we said that we were writing this for those people who wanted the tools to be able to do something about this. And the phrase I used to use with the staff is that we have to write this for the reasonable.
I know that there's a lot of people that don't believe in reconciliation after Cormier and the Gerald Stanley verdict. What would you say to those people that feel like reconciliation isn't possible anymore?
Well, reconciliation is inevitable. I mean, you're always going to have a relationship with this country, with other people in this country. The question is, what kind of relationship do you want? And if you want to have a relationship of distance, then have a relationship of distance, but just know how to have it.
We've seen all of the headlines about Senator Lynn Bayak. What would you say to people who think that the residential schools didn't have that much of an impact on Indigenous kids?
Well, what I've said to her, and that is that the only way you'll know is to talk to them. And don't talk to them and then ignore what they're telling you and make up stuff, which is what she tends to do. It is about understanding them at a visceral level and imagining what it would be like if you went through that process. Or if you can't do that, imagine what it would be like for your children to go through that process. And understand that the process of taking children away for the purpose of indoctrinating them into a different culture is inherently a negative process.
I know that there were criticisms about using the term cultural genocide instead of just genocide. Would you still use that term today?
Cultural genocide is genocide. You know, people need to understand that. And I would continue to use it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with using it. I think it has meaning. And it's more descriptive of what the process was really all about. The schools were not put in place for the purpose of killing the children. The schools were put in place for the purpose of killing the culture in them. And that's what we wanted people to understand, this process. And other processes are all about too. The child welfare system does the very same thing because they fail to recognize the importance of that culture to Indigenous children. They think that there is no culture. They've convinced themselves of that without realizing, in fact, that that's a cultural value that they live with.
Only 10 of the calls to action have been completed out of the 94. How do you feel about that?
I was surprised any have been completed, quite frankly. It's only been 2 years.
How do you think the government has performed in terms of their obligations in the calls to action?
The federal government? Well, they haven't performed very well. I don't think there's any question of that. I think we're beginning to see some change. And in my conversations with government leaders, I always said, you don't have a plan. And we gave you a plan. The TRC calls to action are a plan. Pass a royal proclamation on reconciliation. Create a covenant on reconciliation and invite the provinces and the territories and the First Nations leaders and the Métis leaders and the Inuit leaders and the church organizations, all of whom have contributed to this relationship, to sign the covenant on reconciliation.
What would you say to people who aren't sure of how to get involved in reconciliation? What advice would you have for them?
Well, I always tell them you're already involved, whether you like it or not. This is not an audience sport. You know, reconciliation is a participant sport, and they're already engaged. So the question is, how are you engaged? And how do you want to change your engagement? That's the real question. And when people ask me, what can I do? I always say, well, first of all, read the report. Read the summary, at least. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. And if you can't figure it out after that, read the calls to action and figure out which one of those interests you or which one of those you can do something about, and then do something, because people who can should.
What makes you hopeful?
Okay, I'm just going to end it there because it's just about over. And stop sharing. One of the reason I shared that today was because, of course, you've now completed your plans of action. And I wanted you to see another plan that took years in development and a lot of community consultation and work. And so the question then becomes, how can we be allies and connect as agents of possibility as we design, facilitate, and build projects and art? So last class, we, as you may recall, we activated an object-based learning as a way to focus and speak from our differences and also from our commonalities in community. And now the next phase is how can we find creative ways that we can connect with both in these sort of, and we also talked a bit about sort of emotionally charged moments and memories. So how can we use the use of these objects to enable those kinds of connections? So objects, cultural objects, so books, jewelry, candles, some of the things that people brought, things that are significant to us hold so much of who we are and of our collective stories and histories, which of course is why repatriation and access to such cultural objects is so important to Canada's Indigenous peoples. And you may recall that Sean spoke about the Battersea Museum's efforts around this specifically. And I think he was referencing as well their moccasin collection. So how powerful are the objects we make or design in providing opportunities for creative and long-lasting ongoing impact? So we have a guest with us today from New Brunswick, Canada. I have to mention Canada, who has a substantial history of working with communities, especially considering the social determinants of health. So Nancy Halifax was born on the North Shore of New Brunswick on Mi'kmaq territory. They resides on unceded territories on Wolastoqiyik lands. There's a white, queer, mad crip settler entwined within the colonial and nation-building project of Canada, while also struggling hopefully toward decentering the normative. As a conceptual artist working within the social fabric, Halifax's crip praxis uses handwork as a social practice and as a response to the pace of life ruled by extractive politics, current work queries, embodiment, and modes of labor. Their work has been published by arts, literary, and academic presses. So I'm going to turn you over to Nancy, and we haven't had time to do a test. But Nancy and I did meet on Teams recently and everything was working. So I do hope, Nancy, you have more success than I've had this morning. So I'll turn you over to Nancy.
Thank you. And thank you, Pam. Thanks to all. Thank you all to Pam and their teaching team and to everyone who's here for being here. I hope you can all hear me. Yeah? Okay, good. Pam, at some point, can you share me so I can share some slides? Can somebody, I don't know how to share my slides.
Nancy, do you see in the top right corner beside the leave button something that says share?
I do, and it's gray.
Oh, okay. Give
Yeah.
me a second.
Yes, technology, it defeats us.
Honestly.
But you know, it's okay. I
You
always
have
think
to
of
change it to everyone,
It is on everyone. I'm just,
for everything.
yep, I'm just double checking.
I'm trying to do the same thing as well. But I'm on I had to switch back to my old computer this morning because my new one wasn't working. So. Yeah, it is on there.
Yeah, it is on.
Yeah.
Okay. Should I send these to you, Pam?
Yeah, or you can
Because
send,
send them to Judith because I'm
send them
almost
to me.
blind.
Okay,
And so it
right.
takes me twice as long to do anything. And also I'm working on an old computer that's not working very well right now. So yeah, just if you can
Okay.
put it in the chat line. Sorry about that, because you are set. It's indicating that, let me just check meeting info.
Yeah, it's all set up properly, but Nancy, if you just send them to me, I can pull them up and share them on my screen, and you can just let me know when you want me to forward through them.
Okay. I'm just going to do that right now.
Sorry, everyone. Teams has been wonky for me this morning, so I don't know what's going on.
It is what it is.
Indeed. Okay, I found it. How about that?
All right.
I found them, so I will send them. It's uploading. Yay. And I know it'll take a minute to upload, and I don't need them. Right. Okay, great. So Judith, I'm sending these to you.
Okay.
Sent. Let's hope that they get there. Wah. So now I'm back over here. Thank you again, and apologies for this. So I'm sitting here in my living room on in couch, what I call couch harbor, and I will tell you a little bit more about that later. On my side is my dog, my service dog named Stan, or S, who is covered up with blankets because it's cold here. So I'm a white woman with long braids hanging by each side. I'm wearing a dark sweater. There are bookcases behind me. So in beginning, I guess I'd just like to again say thanks, always thank you, and show gratitude. And I'd like us to all acknowledge the lands that we're on, wherever we are. So I'm on in New Brunswick, and the land where I live and work and engage community is traditional, unceded, never ceded, unsurrendered territory of the Wolastoqiyik, the Pesco-Tumakati, and Mi'kmaq peoples, honoring the spirits of the treaties of peace and friendship. There's large negotiations always ongoing, it seems, tripartite negotiations with the feds, the indigenous peoples, and the province around land settlements. These are really important for me as a white person, a settler, to support. For wherever you are, please feel free to acknowledge the peoples of the lands you're on. You can do that in the chat, or you can just do that within yourself. I address the land as a Celtic mongrel. I think 2 generations on one side and 3 on the other. I'm a white, crip, queer settler, uninvited to these lands. But in coming together around today and alongside each other, there is a sense that we have to acknowledge the land and her critters as kin. We are inter and intradependent. And as Murray Sinclair says, we must acknowledge that there is work to be done, decolonizing, fulfilling obligations and responsibilities to Indigenous communities, their sovereignty, their resurgence, imagining things like how can lands be returned to Indigenous jurisdiction? What might that look like? And we must celebrate and direct our attention to those who teach us a different kind of attunement to the world, and who guide us as we feel and write and imagine a different world for all of us. And I'm so grateful to be here. And whenever I do an acknowledgement, I always have to say that it is gifts. Every bit of that is a gift from others, from conversations, from readings, from histories. My acknowledgement is limited, of course, like the limits of all knowledges, but yet I really appreciate the wisdom, the care, and the kindness of those who have granted me their teachings and their practices and protocols. It was funny when Murray Sinclair talked about residential schools. Where I happened to grow up in New Brunswick, there were residential schools. Of course, there was the 60s scoop, and kids I hung around with, Indigenous kids from the reserve just up the road, had run away. I had no place to live, so we often hung out together in the woods. And it was only many years later that we understood what was going on. Many years later. So, and I'm glad we're finally beginning to understand the horrors and the violences of residential schools. And for today, I know this is, oh my goodness, yay, thank you. Thank you, Judith, yay. So I'm going to get to this slide in 1 second. So I know that I've been thinking lots about this conversation. And I want you all to feel free that you can throw a question into the chat or raise a hand. Maybe Judith, maybe if you're still around, you could help me with that. If
Hi,
anyone, yeah.
Nancy, sorry, I because I'm sharing my screen, I actually can't see the chat. So
Okay.
I don't know, Ashlyn, if you don't mind doing that, is that okay?
No, I don't mind at all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I really appreciate it. Yeah. And then we can get to those with support from this community at this point in time. And knowing that if I answer questions, I could throw off the horizon of what we're talking about, but that's okay too. I will welcome that. So my first question is always, what is community? What does it mean? And at any point in time, I will invite you to share that. And maybe if you have your notebook with you, you can sketch or write or collage something, sew something about what community means to you. And invite your responses to that as well, if you would like to share those. For me, community has changed throughout my life. It's really context dependent, and it depends upon my embodiment, how I'm doing, right? I arrive here as queer, crip, mad, slow, and that my embodiment has been one of the things that has kind of showing me community, right? And has either provided community, hampered my entrance into community, made me overly visible to some communities, etc. I mean, right? It's all of these things. It's a lot to be part of a community, and sometimes we're welcomed into community. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes it's kind of an unsettling thing. What are our connections? So in this slide, we see the words Women's Stories of Aging, Disability, and Homelessness, Red Wagon Collective, and Women in and Around the Junction, Toronto, 2013. So this is a color photograph of an interior. In the foreground, we have some papers. There is a yellow, pink, and white floral tablecloth, which I remember when we got it at the Sally. In the background, there's a large window and a closed door, and we haven't turned around the sign yet. This is a small restaurant, and we should have turned the sign around. It should say open on this side and closed on the other. So we know that there's work to be done. So this depicts a moment from a project done by the Red Wagon Collective and the women in and around the junction in 2013. And it's an empty room at this point, a moment of preparation. And it causes me to ask, how did I end up there? What's my connection to this community? So the Red Wagon Collective began in Toronto in the Junction area in 2007. I can hardly believe that. It's a while. And its main project was a gathering space, which actually took place in a neighborhood storefront, which was this restaurant. And it was the basis from which to create art, have conversations, drink tea. And the gathering space worked with residents of that neighborhood. They would venture in, including women who lived at an adjacent, what is called a temporary emergency shelter. But we know that that's a bit of a lie. There's no such thing as a temporary emergency shelter, not here in New Brunswick and not where you are, sadly. When we completed the first phase of the gathering space, we got more funding. And, we were really lucky. My work has been funded by the Arts Councils, and this project was funded by Toronto and Arts Council and the Ontario Arts Council. And I'm forever grateful for the support we received from those councils. So important. So we were able to continue the project specifically with women from the shelter. Okay, they really, really wanted this to keep going. And they wanted us to have a focus. They wanted us to meet and talk and to complete a series of banners. We did that part, and actually the shelter does have banners on the outside of it, but we wanted to extend that into the banners we needed in our lives, right? And it was all of this work done has been really interesting, and for myself, I recognize the privileges that I had been at ACRUD and the complications for me that arose from my own past history of insecure housing, of homelessness. The people I worked with, we all experienced things like addiction and poverty, queerness, persisting histories of both physical, emotional abuse, mental health differences, varied forms of precarity, all which kind of made this kind of mixture. And we would have to take a breath sometimes and just sit back and go, okay, why are we all here? What are all these differences about? And where is the overlap? What can we provide for each other? So we were positioned relationally. Sid and I, Sid is the person I work with, and they're still working there many years. And I sent around the carceralcontinuum.ca website. So please visit it. That work is so important and it's ongoing and needs attention. It's very hard. I had a long conversation with Sid yesterday about all of that. So we all were working through structures that bound us together and at the same time separated us. So the Monday Art Group, which we'll call MAG, had an open studio drop-in format that met on Mondays in the shelter in the basement. And what was great at the beginning, and over the years it's changed, there was a kitchen and we could actually cook. So we would cook and we would make meals and we'd bring food. And like, you know, every few months we'd have like an enormous community dinner. Over time, that kitchen was taken from us. So, and that was heartbreaking. Because it was such a thing to go out and shop with the women to find out what do you need, what do you want to make for this dinner we're going to share all of our different foods with. And I still truly believe that cooking together, drinking tea together, making cookies, all of these things are really a huge part of making community and being together collectively. So we had a very much a multidisciplinary practice. Our work has included, as Red Wagon Collective, installation projects that intervene in this public space of the neighborhood, but which also sent out tentacles throughout the city and even throughout the province and internationally. And also the forced mobility of the women that we worked with also brought the projects into various new areas and brought people from other neighborhoods down to our neighborhood. So we always were working to ensure we had tokens for people. But our efforts in any community, I think, are always partial, and it's kind of heartbreaking. We see the multiple enactments of entanglements of violences that we can't halt, and we don't always know how to intervene. I know right now in Toronto, it's enormous pressure on, it's cold, it's winter, people are living in encampments. And there's a lot of tension around that. And I won't even go there because it makes me angry. And I know that, believe it or not, the shelter system, the City of Toronto has not spent this year or last year all of the funds that are allocated. So there you go. There's something you can do. Yeah. So there continues, at least from my perspective and those I know working in community, a lot of frustration. And I'm sure those of you who are now working in community also experience that. Like how does change happen? I continue to work closely with Sid on different projects. But for me, I became chronically ill. I'd always been ill. I had an illness, and then it became worse and worse. And it's kind of left me unable to be in community in the ways that I had always been in. And but my connection to this community, the community of homelessness, of poverty, is historic. And I'll tell you a little bit more about myself through two poems. These are in Hook, and one is called, and these, just so you're not confused, this is my history. So I know sometimes it can feel rather oblique, and I just want to be really honest. So A Life Composed, age 11. At 11, she began to take control, knowing the consequences on her slight frame, like a bedtime story. Locked in, she opened the window, jumped to the picnic table, scampered like one of the Flopsy bunnies. Hiding in bushes, she watched the car lights until they disappeared, then to the next bush. The next year of life, A Life Composed, age 12. The heat of estrogen startles them. At 12, the daughter burns. The mother, perimenopausal, has had her fill. Her daily affirmations spoken into the mirror, reflected back as shrieked accusations. The fecundity is too much. Father resorts to fists and drinking to tame the girl, who lopes off to hills to be with her pack, living in woods, at the edges of fields, sleeping under signs and highways. In box cars, they raise each other up. Old man, who works at the Botland plant, thinks the way she rounds the corner at 13 is beautiful. He lets her and her friends sleep together in a single bed in his walk-up flat. Feeds them white bread, cheese whiz, and Coke. In stores, pale orange tomatoes in cellophane packages find their way into coats. The shopkeepers extend kindness towards hungry girls. The guy who owns the pool hall lets her vacuum tables after hours. She picks up tricks to keep safe. A few brothers accumulate. Love and hate tattooed on knuckles. So cool. Makes a family to live in the woods. The church choir is distance. The dream of a mother and father is quit. And that's me. And part of my history of living rough, squatting, all of this has shaped me. So, and I know there's a link somewhere that you guys can all see this project. So, what we often talked about here was how, like, so even from my own experiences many years ago and continued, and then today, one of the things we always talked about was it's getting worse. It's not getting better. And the getting worse means that the systemic violences are accumulating and cumulative. So our bodies continue to accumulate the violence of social policy. Homelessness and poverty are only some of the violences experienced by women and all of those others living with disability in our global society. The violences are worsening, and there is a large socio-cultural response of indifference. The lack of an audience continues. And to me, this is one of the most serious issues, and something that Murray talked about as well, this lack of an audience, or people who don't quite know what to do. So we have to keep working towards building an audience and supporting people with actions that they can take. So through MAG and the Red Wagon Collective, working alongside all of these women who have lived or continue to live as homeless, we recuperated multiple accounts of violence, economic, institutional, material, etc. Can you show the next slide, please? Thank you. I'll describe the slide in a moment. So this is the process for the Monday Art Group making this project Women's Stories. The community restaurant continued to support us and let us use their space when they were closed, which was just awesome. They closed early a couple of days a week, and we go in there when they were closed. For all of the women who wanted, we invited them in. We gave those who wanted them cameras to take pictures. And each week we recorded our conversations and we looked at the pictures. And the following week we would have transcribed everything. We would look at the pictures and the conversation, and it kind of kept building in this really deep kind of text. So we listened and shared stories, dealt with technology, of course, and where we met, we had we would have a slide projector, and we would show the images, and we would actually do some of the collage work like you're seeing in this slide while we were working together. So we did all of that together, which was really fabulous, and not always easy, but we all learned new skills, which was great. The community really wanted these stories. And even though the project was focused on aging, I admit to being surprised at the 18-year-olds who showed up. And we know that living without housing causes aging to occur rapidly. So it wasn't unusual actually to have young people in a project on aging and homelessness, sadly. So we were all ages. This slide shows 3 sets of hands grouped around some phrase that says women cannot grow from moving into shelters where all they do is fight to survive. And underneath the banner heading is, I've done millions of jobs. Show me the job I haven't done. And I'll provide a bit more of a context. So each banner has a red strip at the bottom that we decided upon, on which a subtext was written. Some of the banners have text on the images, some of them don't. But the banners project the histories of the participants in ways that allow for the gaps, the contradictions, and the tensions to be expressed. Because it's not just one thing that was being expressed, it was multiple kinds of experiences of what it was to be excluded, to be marginalized, to be living on the streets, to be living for extended periods in poverty. So there was this kind of sense that amongst this, it also situated the disability experience as this kind of undecidability, which this wonderful philosopher from the UK, Margaret Shildrick, talks about disability as undecidability being deeply unsettling to the cultural imaginary, because we keep moving, we're excessive, we leak, we do all kinds of things that the normative cultural imaginary isn't ready yet to contend with. So we had that, we had the disability aspects, the aspects of homelessness, of aging. And we understood all our experiences as kind of fluid and intersectional, uncertain, ambiguous, messy, and social. So we began to have diverse understandings, and this would open up our conversations. And the setting also allowed for this kind of fleshy or embodied fleshiness to be there. If somebody needed certain kinds of food to eat, we made sure that was available. One of the biggest issues with poverty is losing your teeth. So not being able to eat certain things. So that was always kind of high up. How do you get nutritional value to people, right? This is ongoing. But it was just so joyous so much of the time. What was being dismissed outside was being welcomed within our community, our temporary community, which is still ongoing, actually. I still know many of these people. So the images that you see in the booklet that we published are a selection from 30 completed banner designs. And the text that you see in the Women's Stories booklet, I don't know what to call it, monograph, yeah, consists of excerpts from the transcripts. So if you want to go to the next slide. So thank you, Judith. So we have here a slide, landscape format, and the banner says, I'm 51 and just learning to fight back. And on the text, on the white text on the background says, it can be something small, simple, really, like walking down the street, and there is this bicycle covered in flowers. It just makes me smile. So where do we find joy, right? So we have here a bicycle covered in flowers, resting, against the curb, in front of a house. Yeah. So where do we find joy? Where do we find what makes us smile? And that was one of the things we talked about. And how do we fight back? And how does feeling joy become part of that thing that supports our fighting back? And the next slide is in 3 sections. This slide is there's 3 kind of sections across the slide. The banner says, I need to express clearly what I need to thrive. So the first section, we see the back of a wheelchair and a ramp, partially, and it says, the big words across say, now I've been given notice. ODSP wouldn't give me a wheelchair because my apartment wasn't accessible. One neighbor donated the wood, another neighbor built the ramp. I can get out of my apartment for the first time in 33 days. The next section shows a woman, a white woman in a wheelchair wearing glasses, and her hands are up and she's smiling. The housing worker I have keeps trying to take me to places that cost $889 or $920. she knows I get $1,049 a month. Does she think I can live like this? And then the final one, we see again this woman in the back of the photograph in front of her ramp. I have to find my own ways I have to find ways to do this on my own. That's why telling my story is so important. I'm not fitting into the normal parameters. So that community action, right? Never really marked, always unnoticed, but supporting this woman to get out into the community, right? Supporting to get out of her house. And the fact that, we have these weird rules. Oh, your apartment isn't wheelchair accessible. Well, we can't give you a wheelchair, even though we know your doctor says you need one. So we know people are doing this kind of stuff all the time, like helping each other, supporting each other, finding fixes, accommodating each other, accommodating ourselves. And that's one of the biggest things with disability is we all learn to accommodate ourselves. So, and disability, homelessness, poverty aren't kind of like these kind of abstract things. They're threaded through with the history of capitalism, where some bodies are immiserated or impoverished and others flourish. There's a tearing of bodies, of communities under capitalism. There's an anti-relationality that can happen. And it provides for us a basis for critique of the violence and the poverty through a materialist perspective. There are spaces that we noted in our coming together on a weekly basis that we collaborated on a counter-social movement of inclusion, a social space that was amenable to just hanging out and supporting each other and telling our stories and taking time with each other, just slowing down, creating kind of homeopathics to the violences of the week, finding space to laugh and to support each other's lives. And one of the things I kept noticing, I guess, too, I was becoming new academic around that time, working in 50,000 jobs, trying to find some, some way out. And that I was writing a lot about violence and experiencing my own history of violence and recognizing that how do we acknowledge endurance, agency, resistant capacities as important. And then I think about, well, I'm a writer and an artist. I'm a conceptual artist, trained as a conceptual artist, and the violence of language. How do we, like, even writing these things? I know, Pam, you said there's what's it called? I wrote this down, a trigger warning. And thank you for that, because whatever we're talking about, they usually involves violence, especially if we're talking about disability, homelessness, poverty. Violence is going to come into it. We're talking about cultural, social contexts that for some people are immutable. They're unchanging. And so one of the things that I find hard is that even talking about this, I can construct an identity, right? And I can flatten out someone's life experiences. And even in trying to bring people in who are excluded from public discourse into the public discourse, there's a danger, of flattening them and in that way excluding them, constructing them in an essentialist kind of way. And so, it brings me to thinking about how does language construct community? And so we began to think about that in the Monday Art Group, how, what kind of language are we using? And it was a wonderful open conversation. And over time, we thought, we're neighbors. That's what we are. We're all neighbors. This is awesome. So that was great. So we became neighbors and brilliant. It was so simple, right? But so complicated. And as for me later, as I was at the same time, I was writing a book of poetry and called Hook. And I was trying to conceptualize this, like, what does it mean for neighbors? And I wasn't always happy with that. So I came up with this. I'm living in the only bilingual province in Canada, New Brunswick. So, and I was born here. My French is terrible, But the words that came to me were nosphosine. And that nosphosine, Nosvoisines, operates as an act of renaming. It performs a disruption within the colonial dominance of English, and then we begin to question that. So even one small act can support an opening. Because I guess part of me is interested in how meaning gets corralled, right, into this consensus, that it's as if we all understand what we're talking about. And trust me, we don't. I don't. I have all kinds of shit going on. I have a, ADHD. I'm totally out of my meds. So I'm not always coherent. I'm not linear at all. Credible sometimes, incredible always. Rationality is not something I aim towards, right? So, and that's who I am, and I've struggled to be this person for a while, and so I want to welcome meaning and into spaces of uncertainty. So, this ambiguity within language is really interesting. It's a potential. So, for all of you working in community and thinking about language, we can shift signifiers, and we can reorient from normative tasks of assuming that we all understand this the same towards meanings of difference and welcoming those and finding them really wonderful and full of blossoms and textures, forms of knowledge, what we might call other than, knowledge other than the knowledge that we are given. And I won't get into this now, but all of this leads me into the project I'm actually starting at this moment as these long percolating notions around language are beginning to find form in something that's called visual poetry or VisPo. And maybe we can talk about that later, but I'm excited. But people are living with policies that are written on their bodies. There's a great article by this guy, Joseph Fracchia, who accurately describes how the horrors of capitalism, the effects of policy are experienced as being written on bodies. And the meaning is deciphered by people through their wounds. So the wounds of capitalism are being written on people's bodies through legislation and through policy. Yes, I know. And my dog just woke up. So, yeah, you're very good. Sorry about that. So all of this, I eventually came to write Hook, and we wrote a lot, and we had poetry readings, we wrote journals, we wrote together, we wrote alone, and Hook arose from the work, and I loved it. We held poetry readings at various corners in the neighborhood, and Hook was written to address the ongoing extremity of suffering within Canada. And that continues with my work when I think of the last poem in Act Normal is 3 words together as one, which means Canada meaning unbearable. So this has been my politics for a long time, trying to figure out, well, who am I? And there's a lot of patriotism right now, right? So what does, I get really, there's a lot of tension, frustration, and confusion about how to unpack these things. Because we still live in this place where there's so much inequity and there's so much poverty and people are dying in our streets. And the poetry I write doesn't explain this. It doesn't rationalize this. But these are my emotional responses, my narrative truths. They're not facts. There's something for me as a witness providing an account. I think most writing, most art, writ broadly, relies on our imaginations. Art doesn't provide truth. It provides so much more than that. Fragments found in chance passing, kind of like you're sitting and you're looking at a painting or a collage, or you're reading a poem, listening to music, and you feel it in your body. Doesn't always come through the lips easily, but you feel it in your body and it sits there. And over time, if we're lucky, it begins to percolate up. And if we're lucky, we've got a pencil handy. So from a crip perspective, the work I the work I do isn't rational or logical. But my hope with Hook and with other projects I've been doing is that there's an acknowledgement of all of those folks who live and die rough in Canada, right? And we did so many other projects. So can you give me another slide? I know my time's almost up. So this was a series of banners we painted, and we see a banner here. Homeless women do not get enough shelter, sleep, or food. 35% get less than 6 hours sleep each night. So we were looking at statistics of poverty and homelessness, and the women were writing these on pieces of cloth. If you can show the next slide. This is a quilt we made. Everyone was learning. Some people were experts, and over time we did this huge quilt. Next slide. Sometimes it became, thrifting, lots of thrifting to get yarn and wool and other things, and then hours spent untangling, which was always fine. We would just chat, right? And if someone's hands were full of yarn, then we would make them a cup of tea or whatever it is they needed. Next slide, please. And so there's a tent. We made the quilt into a tent, and it actually was really beautiful inside. You could, all of the sun would come in, and you see all these beautiful kind of lacy shapes. And then the becoming of the tent I always really enjoyed. And that was in Durham, Ontario. And I'm going to just close out with this final project. So Judith, if you can show me the next slide. Oh, yes. So there we also made lawn signs with the banners on them. So, and that was a really great thing to do. And the women really loved that, to be able to put up lawn signs. And this is one that we showed earlier, which says, which is a story about the ramp being built. So we have that. And next slide. Okay, there it is. So the art of conversation was, we did this for an exhibit. We met on the corner of Dundas West and Pacific, bringing needles, bits of fabric, crochet hooks, knitting needles, yarn, whatever we had, to build something around this telephone booth. And here we see the telephone booth on one side, which is covered with flowers and flounces and all kinds of things. And we have a tag. It says, "In the dark times, will there also be singing?" Yes, there will be singing about the dark times, which is a quote from Bertolt Brecht. If you don't know him, please read. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant work. Very good. So what was really interesting about this was that at one point the phone booth got set on fire. The phone was taken. The booth, etc., is gone now. And we know that phone booths are incredibly important to people who live in poverty. A lot of people don't have phones. And one thing some of the shelters have done in the past is put plates over their electrical outlets so people can't charge the phones they do have. So these are ongoing violences, some so subtle you wouldn't even think about them, right? But the absence of phone booths is another one of those that people can't, yeah. So anyway, it's 2 o'clock, so I should stop. Yeah. Oh, the banners, yes. This one never got made, but I love it. It's a banner on the side of what would have been the side of the building. It seems so simple, a cup of tea, but it's so much more. And we have a small person in front of a big cup of tea on a banner in front of the shelter building. Yeah. Marlene Bluebird Stickings, who passed away a few years ago. We all worked together to create a homelessness flag, and it was shown many places, but here it is, a photograph from it on the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty demonstration in 2016. There's a large red circle around Marlene's in the back of it. It says housing now, and there's kind of a crocheted housing, crocheted Canada maple leaf broken in half with people falling through it. And then the other side there is an image of the cookies that we made, which were houses. We were making cookie houses. So yeah. Oh, and this is where my chronic illness came in. So we have Sid on one side, lying down on the ground where there's a notice for the construction that's about to begin. Sid is wearing their pajamas. We did a performance about working, and we were wearing our work clothes are our pajamas. So, and they were covered with phrases from our audiences that we then embroidered. Hello, mister. And then I'm on the other side, but I'm in hospital. I'm covered in warm blankets and I'm lying down as well. And in between us is the quilt along with some assorted oddments. Yeah. Anyway, I can end it here because I know I'm going over my time. So thank you.
Nancy, don't worry, because we were very sort of slow getting started because of all the technical muck-ups this morning. So I must apologize for that. It's so wonderful to see you over there, over there, over there. I think that's east. Oh wait, east is that way for me.
Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah.
One of the things that I found so moving, it's so lovely to hear of your work. And of course, it took me back and reminded me of things that we have sort of done together, right? When I was at OISE, and running WI projects at OISE, and you did that wonderful project then on homelessness. And I remember you doing a workshop at the time, and I remember the fabric. I remember doing the knitting and the crocheting at that time. I think there were a couple of things I wanted to ask about, and then I invite people as well to feel free to ask any questions regardless of how oblique they may be, and you're welcome to speak them aloud or to put them in the chat line, and Judith or Ashlyn will help retrieve those. But the two things for me that I think were really, I love that meanings of difference piece as well. Knowledge other than we are given. But I think the big piece for me, which I thought was so bang on and is often missing especially around conversations around disability, is that kind of intertwinedness of poverty, disability, and homelessness. And that has certainly been the case for me. I've been homeless 3 times, and most recently in my 60s, which was very, very difficult. And it's interesting this comes up because I'm actually kind of sort of dealing with that right now. Do I move? I've been offered a disability spot in a co-op, but I'm not, it's a wheelchair spot. And I'm going blind. So do I fit the criteria becomes the question. And also the irony of it is that the co-op itself is in an extremely inaccessible space. So it's sort of like, as you say, there's kind of this narrative about, oh, well, you have this great opportunity, but it removes you from community. It puts you in a situation where in order to get access, for example, to groceries will cost me a lot more money. So it's just that wonderful kind of, and first of all, the piece around embodiment and intersectionality and how we are within our bodies, very complex. And then the other piece of how so often bits of it are left out, especially in conversations around disability. And what I found very powerful in what you were talking about is that piece around embodiment, that piece around complexity, and that insistence in keeping all of that front and center. So, I mean, has that been intentional on your part, or has that,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, having been homeless, lived rough, being disabled, having lived in poverty, working in this area where, again, it's only getting worse. It's never gotten better.
Yes.
Ever. Housing in Canada is a travesty. Housing standards, when we talk about disability, are a travesty. Having worked at a university, I actually saw accessible washrooms being transformed back into non-accessible ones, into 2 stalls rather than 1 accessible washroom because of the building standards. So we have all this legislation, but the legislation is, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this. It's going to sound so mean because people work hard on this legislation, but it's really not worth it, right? It causes so many problems. There's so many things. If you start really carefully dissecting the building standards, the other standards around access, they are very poor. They don't meet the standards. The Americans with Disability Act isn't much better, but it is better. So, and we're introducing new federal legislation, which my understanding is it's terribly weak. Again, there's never any money to go so that there is something that needs to happen. If particular large businesses are not being accommodating of their workers, for instance, they are not fined, and that money is not put into a central repository where people with disabilities can then draw upon that, you know, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much need. And there's this complexity of embodiment. Most people think one body, one disability. Well,
Yes.
I'm sorry, no. And if you're disabled, you'll never be chronically ill. No, I wish, right? So there's all of this stuff. I mean, I was born with a learning disability. I was hit by a car in hospital for over 3 years out of 5 years. I was in and out, left with the body of an 80-year-old at 19. All of these things, right, which continue on with the addition of a chronic illness, with the addition of another disability. And so you kind of go, okay, oh, well, right? And it's like being a feminist or whatever, like for most of us who have complicated identities, which voice needs to be heard in this particular meeting?
Yes.
Right? Because if I try to voice them all, I'll just sound, I love the word crazy in this instance. I'll sound crazy to them, and maybe that's good, right? Maybe that's what I should sound like, because the responses are not useful to us in terms of changing. And I really hear you, Pam. I'm just like sending you lots of heart strength, because it's hardcore not being in precarious housing. So I'm very intentional about trying to bring all these things together. And yeah.
Yeah, there was something else that jumped up. Judith had a comment or question as well. Judith?
Yeah, Nancy, thank you for sharing. I mean, there were so many things that you spoke of that resonated with me. One of them that I found really interesting that relates to this class for me is the idea that, these projects that you begin are ongoing and constantly evolving and expanding and growing. And sometimes that can feel a bit overwhelming. And I think for the students in this class, I'm just wondering if you have any advice, not like how to proceed, but like they're looking at one small project for this class that they can accomplish within a short time frame. Is there any advice you have around like those first steps just to make it manageable?
Really listen hard to the community, right? Put your own desires aside. Try to meet with them in order to kind of help them figure out what it is that you're going to do together, right? And be humble in it. It's their project, right? And you're facilitating it. And they do go on. And with luck, the project you begin in the community will continue. You might never know about it. You might know about it. You might have continued. I mean, that's the ethical issues. Do I continue to hang out with this community when school ends? There's all of these things. And those are very deeply personal, moral questions about where we begin and end. And I know that for me, community had become so important, and all my work was being done in community. And then with illness, and this could happen to you in a project if you become ill and you have to withdraw from that community. It is deeply upsetting to you and to the community. And for me, it felt like no one recognized me anymore. I was recognized in community, but I felt unrecognizable to myself outside of that community. So be prepared for profound changes within yourself, and those connections, and keep going, right? This isn't the end. Keep going and learn. Yeah. And yeah, teach and learn. So it's always like Pam and I come from a teaching and learning perspective.
Thank
One
you. I
thing,
appreciate that.
oh, sorry,
Yeah.
thank you, Judith. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, and that's sort of around this whole kind of issue, and I call it an issue because it is an issue, this whole piece around accommodation. And yeah, and you know, and how problematic that can be. And my interest, certainly in terms of teaching, is to provide as inclusive environment as I can, as in a much Judith, I'm very grateful to have Judith as a teaching assistant. And Judith's sole purpose is among many other things, is to provide learning support for students. But I also want to, I'm trying to think of a better word. I also value, which I see very much in that one image of the woman in the wheelchair who finally gets her ramp, right? Is
Yeah.
that idea, and I don't think the word is self-reliance. I don't think that's what it is. It's more about that we have a right to be powerful people. We have a right to rigorous education. We have a right to work with others in community as people with disabilities, acknowledging our differences and commonalities. But in doing so, we create opportunities among ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the closest I'm getting
Yeah.
to it.
What I'm thinking about as you're talking is about how disability is enacted in community. It's enacted collectively, so that whether you're in a classroom or a community, it's done collectively. We're all doing disability accommodations, disability access, right? Which is so key. And I know for me, I know sometimes when I was teaching, my students are like, oh my God, you seem so chaotic. You have a whole desk to yourself and it's just scrambled with materials. And then you've got a dog laying under your desk, and, you know, and then somebody comes in and wants to borrow you for something. So, um, disability friction, that's called.
That was the word I was looking
Yeah.
for. Yeah. Kaylin, I think has a question. I've got my screen blown up as large as I can so I can read names a bit today. Hi, Kaylin.
Hi, Kaylin speaking. I just wanted to mention two things. One, when I sent you my accommodation letter, you were the first professor in my experience throughout university that actually responded with their own access needs, and how deeply I appreciated that. That accommodation is like not just telling somebody what you need, but a conversation between two parties of how to move forward and make things better for everybody. So I really appreciated that and your transparency. And Nancy, I have a question for you. As a person who's living with a disability that often leaves me unable to leave the house, I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for building and maintaining community. How do you stay connected when your energy is extremely limited?
I love you. Yes, build your own couch harbor, right? First of all, so my couch harbor is here. It's covered in pillows and blankets and my service dog. And it's where I work from when I have all these kind of devices that hold computers up for me or over my head, where if I'm really exhausted. So talk to somebody who's an engineer, or if you're lucky enough to have an OT or a PT to support you on that. But what is community? This is what leads me to my current work. It's kind of, what is it? I am unable to go out a lot. I'm exhausted all the time. I may just need to be lying down all like for 3 days, 4 days in a row and not doing anything strenuous. So how do we build community? So I imagine this. So right now, my first community is my service dog, Stan. So, and my plants. And then I've been photographing all of the dead insects in the house. And I've got this archive that I'm making that kind of trying to sit with these and kind of figure out, are you my community? So I'm asking kind of really open-ended questions. Is the person walking past my house with their dog part of my community? How do I invite others in to this? Because one of the things we know is that disability and chronic illness mean isolation and often loneliness. So deliberately, I work online twice a week with other conceptual artists, and I work with a group of poets. We do an early morning write twice a week. So I'm very intentional in trying to ensure I have some kind of contact, because I can go days only without talking.
Mhm.
So, and I would open this up to everybody. I mean, what is community? And there have been some interesting arts examples. I wish I could remember who did this, but she had lights that would turn on in a room, and they were all over the world. And I'm not sure how she had some computer literacy, obviously, that I don't have. And people would say they were around by turning on the light in that room in the UK. Another person is Liz, whose name escapes me, who's done performance art on lying down. Another British artist, Liz. Do you know who I'm talking about, Pam? Beautiful, beautiful work. She did this work on the Thames, where she talked with people with disability under the politics of ATOS, which was this group who went in and were cutting everybody off services, and she made each individual piece of clay from the Thames mud.
I don't know the piece, Nancy, sorry.
I'll send it to you and you can share it with everybody. So I look to artists, what are we doing, right? What are we doing in community? And kind of we need to define community differently and open it up to a conversation and breathe into it. I'm not sure if that even helps, you know?
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Kaylin, if I can just jump in as well. Nancy, for your information, I had started the Mature Student Collective at OCAD. And one of the biggest issues for us was, as you can imagine, older people with multiple obligations trying to schedule anything was ridiculous. And so we had a number of tactics like in-person, online, et cetera. But one person, Gabby, who came to our group last year, set up this online coffee chat. And because it was her initiative, she picked the date, so the day of the week, and she literally would just send out this notice to the people in the group, or you could do it to people and said, I'm home this date. I'll be online on this time. If you want to join me and just talk and hang out, we can do that. And we had no agenda. We just got together online on the days that Gabby chose. And it was lovely. Like sometimes there'd be like me and Gabby, and sometimes there'd be 3 other people, and sometimes there'd be 10 other people, and the days changed. And it just sort of worked, whatever worked for Gabby. And it was really enjoyable. So maybe there's an opportunity for you when you're at home to have a list of people that you can invite maybe to join you, just to sit and have tea or coffee or chat online.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And just the name Elizabeth Sweeney comes to mind. Elizabeth Sweeney,
Yes.
brilliant artist, disability advocate. I'm not sure if Elizabeth is still at the Canada Council or not, but did the MA in critical disability studies. And we've had conversations over the years about an audience of one for our work. And it could be ourselves. It could be the dead insect, right? But for those of us who are living in these bodies, we have to imagine a different kind of world. And through our imagining it, we bring it into into being, at least some small part of it, right? Yeah. I think hope is a practice. I'll say that.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that too, because this past weekend, that's exactly what Candice Wilkins and I did in Picton. Is we did hope as a practice, as an event for the community, in Picton, Ontario. And yeah, it was really wonderful. I love your drop-in piece too, Judith. Thank you so much for sharing that. There's a wonderful idea for also for those of you who haven't yet thought about who your community is going to be, because that would be terrific. And it's a very, the project or what we do does not have to be this huge, complex design thing. Sometimes, so what, for example, what Candice and I were doing, it was called Royal Coffee.
Mm.
We meet on a regular basis to have an very expensive cup of coffee at the Royal Hotel in Picton. And then the other thing that was happening is was also CD Saturday. This was for Terminalia. And then we invited a certain number of people to have conversations of hope with us, and which we did at CD Saturday. And then we went back to the Royal to have our coffee, and we sat there for 2 hours. But what was interesting is, again, very simple, getting together, having coffee, having conversations, but it's the intentionality of it that shifts it, is making that decision to connect or making that decision to commit to this. It's like Margaret Dragoo saying, when she was doing Cleaning and Loving It, and people asked her and said, well, how could this possibly be a performance? Because you're just cleaning people's houses. And she said, because I say it is.
And that Merle Letterman Ukele's, who in 1969 wrote their manifesto, which was all about cleaning, so that everything Merle Letterman Ukele's did was art. A one-page handwritten manifesto, brilliant, housework, whatever, taking care of the babies, clean, and one of the big performances was shaking the hands of every garbage worker in New York City, right? And collecting their gloves. So beautiful, beautiful work. So there's, I mean, it just gets me happy to think about all the things we can do, right? Your community might be the deer in your neighborhood. They're a very important part of my community, right? So I say hello to them. Stan is very good with them. He doesn't bark at them. They're used to us now. So community also doesn't have to mean humans. It can be the more than. So and I think these are some fabulous ideas. Thank you, Judith and Kaylin and Pam. These are wonderful. Yeah. Anyway.
Maybe
thanks.
what I'll do in closing, because this reminds me as well, Nancy, of a project which I still haven't finished that we started many, many years ago. And of course, my computer, because it's so slow, is not letting me open this. But as you may recall, both Nancy and I have had is that all right for me to disclose?
Yeah.
That both Nancy and I have had breast cancer.
Yeah.
And my left breast was removed and Nancy's right. And so we decided that we completed each other. And so we started this project called Now We Are Dancing,
Mm-hmm.
where we dance
Yeah.
together. And in the years following is that and this is sort of part of the work I was doing with Candice this weekend as well, but in the years following is that whenever I get into these conversations with people in Foodland in Wellington, or in the butcher section of whatever, and find out about the challenges that they're dealing with. And then I say, we really need to dance. So I've waltzed with people, in front of the fish fryer at Schooners, or I've danced with people in front of the deli counter at Foodland. And it is that piece about now we are dancing. Now we are taking it out into the community. And it all originated from that little kernel of you and me dancing.
Thanks. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
trying to find the image, but unfortunately, I'll try one more time because I am actually going to work on it.
Okay.
I'm just trying to, now we are dancing file folder. Hold on. I'm going to see if I can open this. Because I did find, oh, goody, goody. I'm on my old computer.
Yay.
Yeah, because my new one just was not working properly. I'm now trying to, and of course, Mel, I just finished doing sorry, this is like old term week here, and I shouldn't eat up the time. But I'll just quickly share. It's very tiny because I lost the video, of course. But there's the image of the two of us dancing.
Oh, nice.
With
Nice.
Mel behind us on the accordion. Yeah.
Nice. Oh, that's gorgeous. That's gorgeous. Thank you, Pam.
Oh, and thank
Um,
you. Thank you
yeah.
so much, Nancy, for
Yeah.
coming to us today.
You're very
And
welcome.
and the one thing I wanted to request, Judith, this may be beyond your technical ability, but Ashlyn might be able to help, is I'm wondering if there's a way that we can kind of extract from the recording from today is Nancy's talk, and provide a copy of it to Nancy as well, so that you have a copy of this for your own archives. And I don't know if they're still with us right now, but I noticed that Kathy Capon, I don't know if Kathy's left, but Kathy Capon and also Laura Thrasher were with us today.
Laura's left, and I believe Kathy has also
Yeah,
possibly
they
left.
probably have. They
Yeah.
probably have meetings. But just so you know, Nancy, that Laura Thrasher is from the Faculty and Curriculum Development Center and is the person who's kind of the disability person there.
Nice. Nice.
And Kathy Capon is the manager of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Sustainability Initiatives. So it would be, if with your permission, it might be nice to supply them as well with a copy of your talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's good that they were both here.
I
Yeah.
will try and do that. Just so you know, Nancy, you can always come back into this Teams chat line and retrieve the recording as well.
Okay.
But I will
Thank
try
you.
and get you an edited down version of it.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. And everyone, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to send a couple things to Pam and Judith, so maybe they can give me the weird art stuff I'm thinking about. So thank you.
Oh, and Nancy will be with us in April.
Yes.
So yes,
Yes.
I can't, I'll have to
Yeah.
look it up, but I think
Yeah.
the date was the 10th possibly.
I think it's the 10th.
Yeah, April 10th at Tangled Arts and Disability.
Yeah.
And people are welcome to bring their companion animals to the event. And of course, and Nancy will also be there coming down from New Brunswick. And there will be food, there will be party. And it's at 401 Richmond Street on the first floor, totally accessible building. So come be with critters and with people, enjoy and access, and you get opportunities to write poetry as well.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
great. Be well.
Yeah,
We'll
you
talk
too.
again soon. Okay, give my
Indeed.
love to Meg as well.
Okay. Yeah.
So folks, I think we probably should take a break. Judith, do we have some student project presentations today?
Yes, we have one student presentation. We've got Teresa, and I can chat with you about the rest of that after.
Okay, so why don't at 1:45, let's have, I'll turn it over to you. If we only have one presenter, we only need maybe 15 minutes. And then I'm also going to speak to a project as well. And then we'll just make sure people are on their way with the project overview assignment as well, which is due on Friday. So let's take 15, and we will see you back here at 1:45 and with Judith and Teresa. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Judith, did you need to speak to me?